Okay, so welcome everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for lasting this long, especially to make it to the last speech. I hope everyone's enjoying this. And I want to thank the organizers. I don't know if they knew it, but the last two speeches really set the stage for me really well, so that you'll have a better understanding of where I'm going with this. So thank you. Yeah, thank you, Matt. But also first time speaker, first time attendee, so this should be fun. And the last 50 minutes of talking in depth by PowerPoint. All right, so my obligatory about me slide. My name is Archinal. I started my IT career as a junior network admin in the U.S. Army for 6 years with the 75th Ranger Regiment. Then I transitioned to the civilian life where I spent the next 5 years as a security operations center analyst. This is the time where I really found my love for SIMs, logging, specifically Sysmon. Absolutely love it. Yeah, and but I was in a position where I was responding to a ton of alerts that was just annotated, and it just really never really went anywhere. So I was like, I really want to change this. I want to make this better. I want to be effective. And that's when I really came into, I think, what's called detection engineering now. But I was like, I love logs, I love log analysis. Let's go with this. And that's when I stumbled across Cyborg Security, where I am currently. And basically, I'm a threat hunter, content developer, and I'm part of the customer success team and have been for almost 2 years. So on my daily work is a lot of logs. It's building queries, gaining context of the attacks. So that's what I'm going to be talking about in my speech. So a quick overview. I'm going to be discussing what proactive threat hunting is, explaining the threat hunting methodology and process, where IOCs, behaviors, alerts, and static detections fit into this process, because there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to being a blue teamer, and you'll have some people that are like, no, static detections are the best, or no, they're the worst, and I kind of just want to paint a bigger picture that they all play a part, just like all of us. Also, I'm going to talk about dwell time, what it is, why we want to reduce it, and I'm going to introduce you to the my spin on the known unknown matrix, and I'm going to build in some use cases there. So threat hunting methodology. What is proactive threat hunting? Proactive threat hunting is a hypothesis-driven process that we conduct to try to find maliciousness in an environment. It is the act of searching through logs or tools or anything in a network looking for possible infections, compromise, or non-malicious behavior. Proactive threat hunting is focused on behaviors and TTPs. As Alex and Kurt nicely put, IOCs are the easy wins, but the behaviors and the human aspect of it is what we're really after. Searching for things like different ways of lateral movement, privilege escalation, or other tactics, techniques, sub-techniques, or behaviors you can find on the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Once again, thank you, gentlemen, for covering that in such detail. But these are the things that are commonly used by attackers. We base our hypotheses off of all these different items. I emulate the malicious activity and put the hypothesis to the test. The main goal is to find maliciousness before alerts or static detections do. If these alerts or static detections are triggered, then normally, I think it was said earlier as well, which is, I'm super happy about being last. I can repeat a lot of things they've already said, but it's normally too late, right? If something pops, or if ransomware, you get the ransomware notice, it's normally too late. But I also found a common theme that showed plenty of these steps leading up to the payload executing. There were opportunities for detections of finding that compromise and finding the indicators that the attacker is in your network. So indicators of compromise, or IOCs, are artifacts that are normally found during the IR or threat hunting process that helps these analysts trace back the events to determine root cause or where this all started. These effects, or these artifacts, can be hashes, IP addresses, or file names, and plenty of other things as well. But IOCs like this really shine when it comes to static detections. We're using them in a table looking for recently reported known bad indicators, kind of like how AV works with a hash table. Or if you have a SIM that you collect a watch list for IPs, you throw an IP in there and it alerts on it whenever it sees it in your network. But these are things that IOCs are really strong with, but they have in common is that normally they are very easy to change. A sophisticated actor may change their infrastructure between or even during an attack to make it harder to attribute the attack back to them. Now, that being said, I would not completely dismiss IOCs, but I would not consider scanning IOCs as proactive threat hunting. These reports take time to be published, and the incident takes time to be fully investigated. So we can't always consider IOCs up to the CART standard or complete, accurate, relevant, or timely. If the organization that was attacked, if it took them a couple months or even possibly a year to investigate, and they found all these IOCs in the first month, are those still relevant? I mean, that's not even close to being timely, right? But if we get this, if we get it early and we run a scan through our environment real quick, we may have an easy win to say, hey, if we're in the same industry as someone and they got attacked and we take their indicators, if we're in the same indicator, it makes it relevant, it makes it timely, it could, be an easy win for us. So why should you proactively threat hunt? The main goal is to find the enemy before they reach their target and ultimately reduce their dwell time. Dwell time is the time from initial compromise to when the threat is detected, which usually means the sooner they're caught, the better position the organization is in to handle the situation. This detection could look many different ways, from discovering tools being dropped in suspicious locations, strange or anomalous command line arguments being executed, or spelling errors in files that are created. There's also the benefit of addressing visibility and validation of threat emulation if that exists in your environment. When you are testing a hypothesis, you may realize that you don't have the logs required for some of the hunts that you're conducting, which could be used as a use case in your organization to say, hey, we're investigating this threat, we've emulated it, we're looking for certain logs, they don't exist in our environment, they're not local, which means they're never going to make it to the SIM. Then you could possibly talk to the SOC engineer or whoever needs to hear it to say, hey, we need to ingest these logs now because this threat is super relevant to us. So before I dive into anything else, I wanted to actually run through what the threat hunting process looks like from my side anyways. So it contains 6 steps. I like to create a hypothesis, conduct research, create a shell query. I mean, remember, I'm a blue teamer, so I'm dealing with SIMs, I'm dealing with EDRs, MDRs, so I'm using a lot of different language or query syntax, if you will. So that's when I'm talking about a shell query, that's what I mean, and you'll see it a little sooner. We emulate the attack, or pieces of the attack. We actually use the invoke atomics, thank you. And then we perform log analysis, and then we tune our query to reduce the amount of false positives as much as possible. An aspect of this process is to take all the research and intel reports that we have available out on the internet, and we really want to operationalize that intel, not just the IOCs. So taking a little deep dive into each step, for the hypothesis, I create my hypothesis based on a TTP or behavior of my choice, or whatever's trending when it comes to emerging threats. In this example, I'll be using a Word document spawning PowerShell, behavior that's attributed to many pieces of malware like Emotet, which has resurrected and it's back from the ashes, yay. But phishing someone and getting them to enable macros is an old tactic, and there's a reason they keep using it. It's because it works, right? You trick someone in, you get the shell, you're good to go. But we'll be looking at Word spawning PowerShell. So the research. So I chose my idea, and now I need to conduct research on it. How do I get a macro created when it runs from my Word document and open up PowerShell? That's the easy part, because I asked my colleague, which we'll call Tyler, who's a scripting wizard, and I could just sit back and wait. But when it comes to research, what other conditions need to be present for it to work? Is this or is Word fully patched? Is it the latest version? Is it unpatched? What are we talking about here? So there's a lot of different aspects you got to think about once again, building queries to be relevant to your organization. You wouldn't build a query on something that you're not using anymore, right? So what does my shell query look like? Like I said, I'm a lover of sysmon, so that's what I naturally went to. But I'll create my shell query that I will use to detect this activity. This can start as an extremely general query that you see right now, looking for the relationship between two processes. If you look at it, looking at sysmon, log source, I have the parent image, which is winword.exe, and the child image, or the child process, which is image and sysmon, just being PowerShell.exe. Now I always like to put those asterisks there just in case the attacker likes to move it around, so it might not be in its native position. Now you could always say, you know, what if they rename it? That's a whole different story. You know, it takes a little more work, but yeah, eventually we'll find them. But the fun stuff of this is as you work with log sources, and as you find different log sources and get to know your logs, you can start reading an Intel report and say, all right, that's going to live here, this is the process, this goes into that field, and really just start working things already in your brain. And then by the time you're done with your research, you could have 4 or 5 or 6 different queries built in your head. And the next step would just be to test it. Just a shout out, I love the DFIR report. They come out like every two Mondays. Actually, next Monday is the next one. Love it. So emulation. When I simulate these attacks, I do it in, and I want to stress this, in a controlled environment, as should you if you plan on doing these types of things in the future. I can't stress this enough. The last thing I want anyone to do is go home or become a customer of Cyborg Security and say, hey, so Lee talk to BSides, it's cool, we're just going to detonate ransomware in production, call it a day, and we're going to check out the logs. No, please don't do that. But make sure it's controlled. Make sure you're letting people know what you're doing in your organization so that they expect if something does happen, or, you know, and I do want to say this is a caveat. This isn't like red team, purple team stuff that I'm doing. It's solely research to say, hey, we're looking at these threats. We're looking at the logs they produce. So you might want to let your SOC know though, because in case they do have alerts that are looking for this type of activity, if they start going off and they think, hey, we're actually under attack, you could get ahead of that and be like, no, just research testing being done over here. But the goal is to get the attack to look at, not the entire attack, but a piece of the attack to look as realistic as possible. So in the example that I'm using again, with WinWord opening power or spawning PowerShell, I don't really have to set up, you know, a C2 infrastructure. I don't need to start phishing my users. I can simply create a Word document, open it from Explorer, click it, and have the script run, and then PowerShell spawns. Because right then and there, I have WinWord as the parent process and PowerShell as the child process. So, like I said, as realistic as possible without having to do red team, purple team stuff. Now, the fun part is log analysis. I'm a log junkie. I love digging through like a lot of data. Yet I'm not good at machine learning and AI, which is, you know, I'm not a data scientist. I'll say that. But now that it's complete, the next step would be to make sure the logs have been created. First stop is Event Viewer normally, because I'm normally dealing with Windows events or different log sources, but definitely endpoints being window boxes. So I'll go straight to Event Viewer. I want to see if the logs are being produced in the environment, because like I said earlier, if they're not produced locally, there's no way they're going to get to the SIM, and then how is my SOC or anyone else, or my threat hunters or incident responders, going to be able to figure out what's going on. So tuning. Our goal, and my goal, is always to try and reduce as many false positives as possible. If I have my query and it does become a common, or if I discover that's a common thing in my environment, which hopefully it's not, but I have to go back to the research. I have to reassess. I have to look at the tool that I'm using and figure, all right, what are the other flags? Or how is PowerShell used by my users? How does it look different in the attack? And then I want to build something that's a little more specific so that it filters out normal user traffic, and then, once again, SOC analysts, incident responders, threat hunters can point to it directly and say, this is bad because. In my example, I use parent image is WinWord, and then I added the command line, which is tac enc, which normally says, hey, I'm going to be running an encoded command. And hopefully, once again, I don't know your environment, but hopefully that's not happening a lot, and you can use this as like a quick, a quick win. One thing I didn't mention is that threat hunting is not a linear process. Neither is content development, like I'm talking. The one thing I omitted on my graph was arrows. Just like a scientific process, you can always go back a step or two. Say, all right, I may have messed up, or what's different, and keep testing hypotheses, keep formulating queries, keep doing all these different things. It's never just a one and done. So I just want to say that because it does get long, it does get hard, sometimes tiring and exhausting. But back to dwell time. I don't want to get into too many metrics of dwell time, but some of my favorite metrics came from the Mandiant M-Trends report today. Once again, dwell time is the initial time, the time from initial access is gained to when the activity is detected. Now, the M-Trends report said that the global median dwell time was down 21 days in 2021 from 24 days in 2020. The American median dwell time was 17 days. An interesting point, though, is that ransomware, not blue team or security people getting better, is dragging that number down. Technically, a big ransomware notice is a detection, or it's a form of detection that you have been compromised. And investigations that deal with ransomware normally have a dwell time of 4 days. In those 4 days, though, there are opportunities for detections and capturing the activity needed to find the threat actors. Investigations that weren't involving ransomware had a dwell time of 32 days. Now, before I continue on, I want to talk about my humans versus machines side rant. And every time I say that, I don't know if you have any fans of How I Met Your Mother, but there's a specific episode called Subway Wars, where they're all racing to a bar and they're taking different public transportation. And Marshall Erickson decides to take his feet. So, and then he starts singing this jingle of Marshall versus the machine, but it cracks me up every time. So what do machines bring to the table? In our industry, we have terms like EDR, MDR, XDR, NDR, and my favorite, DDR, which I got really good at that game back in high school. I'm glad I got loud, so I was hoping that, or I was worried that I'd say that and no one would understand what I was talking about. But these products can be considered black box solutions, which means customers can't really mess with the configuration of it, but they are fine-tuned machines to capture malicious activity using algorithms, machine learning, neural networks, and all that other data science that I don't really understand. Now, if you're improving your security, or if you're starting here and you have no security and you want to start with one of these solutions, that's a great start because it gives you log visibility, right? It gets you started, versus not having anything. But know that there are some limitations, like only providing visibility into certain hives in the Windows registry that have been determined to be important by the creators of the tool. For a specific example is Windows run registry keys. I think I've seen that in almost every EDR that I've experienced with. Not that they aren't great tools, because the experience that I've had have been positive, but I also know that not all environments are the same, and there really is no easy button in cybersecurity. There's no one size fits all. Also, these tools really report their findings and leave it up to the analyst to determine if the activity is truly malicious. A thing that we do with threat hunting, especially at Cyborg, and that's what makes us shine, is that we build a context. Not only do we create a detection or a hunt package, say, hey, here's the query, go look for maliciousness this way, but we say, here's why it's relevant, here's the attacks that we've seen it in, and then of course we map it to the MITRE ATT&CK matrix so that you know or have a better idea of what's going on. So what about the humans? Well, we're the crucial part of the puzzle as well. We are creative and we all have different perspectives, and so we may approach problems in a different way. This is a strength that we can see, and it's even driving change within large organizations through like diversity and inclusion programs. Because they understand that the more people you have with diverse backgrounds, they may be approaching different problems different ways, and you may find the most efficient solution in that pool. Also, we are curious. We aren't programmed like computers are in a linear fashion, but we like to run experiments, we like to test hypotheses, and we like to be wrong sometimes. In my opinion, being wrong or making mistakes is our best teacher. I can't tell you how much I've learned in my life from being wrong, but I can tell you I've learned very little from being right. Lastly, the malware and threats that we are facing are human, and the artifacts that, that they leave behind can be very human in nature as well. This can be seen when attackers leave hidden messages in source code or in the notes that they create to the organizations. For example, this was in a 2016 dubbed BlackHat, the threat actor group. They attacked, a researcher was taking a look at the source code, and they found this string, and it's meant to be read, "You cannot crack this algorithm, you idiot." Computers don't have what we have in the ego-wise. We are very proud, cocky people, especially like the top-tier talent, and they want to let you know that you've been compromised by leaving stuff like this. I don't think machines will ever do that. I mean, I should knock on wood, but we're not there yet. So, reducing back to dwell time, getting back on track. But what reduces dwell time? There are a couple things: machine learning and artificial intelligence detections. Once, like I mentioned in the humans versus machines, we got static alerts and detections. Ransomware gets a shout out, and proactive threat hunting. So when it comes to ML and AI detections, they can be very powerful because they can alert us to anomalies like a file meeting a criteria that for being malicious based on how it is acting, or even how it's compiled, looking at the different processes it calls, and even detect process injection based on processes that are spawned after, which is actually kind of hard whenever you deal with your normal log sources, like Windows event logs and sysmon. Finding process injection is rather tricky. They do have the ability to look at a large sets of data and create relationships that may have been missed by us humans were us to analyze it using the naked eye. Limitations being that they report their findings, and then it is up to the humans to take the next step and determine, hey, this is malicious or it is not malicious. For example, if you have an ML AI detection fire that says PowerShell seen used for the first time, is that malicious? I don't know. What's the context behind it? Is it a new network admin that was just hired and he's performing his duties for the very first time? Or is it, someone from HR that has never used PowerShell in the first place, or doesn't even know what it is? That would be malicious. So things like that. Those are the limitations of, machine learning. So when it comes to static alerts and detections, these are normally based on activity that have been seen in the wild or reported on or based off of TTPs and behaviors. They prove beneficial when they've been tailored to the environment that they are living in. Remember that not all environments are the same, so not all detections are the same either. I wouldn't take a detection built for an energy company and throw it in, say, banking, because they have different threats and different threat landscapes. So sometimes it doesn't make sense. Tuning these to fit in an organization takes time, and a lot of it, but could play a critical role when it comes to an incident. So if you do take the time to weed out all those false positives, find the detections that work really well, then you can really stop the threat actors before they even begin. And whenever I run a hunt, the end goal is to take my hunt and that shell query that I've created and to tune it and improve it until I can say, hey, I'm no longer hunting for this, I'm detecting. Now, ransomware gets the shout out again. Like I said, there's a lot going on. We are never safe for it. It affects everyone. But in the ransomware investigations or research that I've found, there are opportunities for detections, like I said, in those first 3 days before the payload executes. For example, UAC bypass, which is user account control bypass. There's a lot of ways to elevate your privileges using that, and copying to file shares. How do they propagate the ransomware? And that's normally the easiest. So thanks to our #1 reducement of dwell time. Proactive threat hunting. So it's easy to say, but hard to implement. Not a lot, or organizations are starting to implement threat hunt teams, but it's hard in this industry where everything's go, 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 to actually set a time, start picking people from the SOC, start setting people from, Intel, and say, you now have another responsibility. Now, not that we don't do that, because I know a lot of people that wear a lot of hats, but sometimes it just doesn't work. The fun thing is, though, I found a statistic from CrowdStrike this year that they said 68% of detections were not malware based, and they involved living off the land binaries or programs or executables that already exist whenever you install the operating system. For example, command prompt is a living off the land binary, because I don't know what Windows box doesn't have it. So, what does it all mean? What am I going to do with all this information, and how can how can it help my security posture? All right, sweet. So I came up where I found the known unknown matrix online, and I was like, wow, I could probably do something with this, because when I'm talking about relationships between artifacts and these artifacts existing in an environment, it kind of just fell into place. So I'm going to take the things I've been mentioning, I'm going to throw them in there for you. So the 4 quadrants are known known, known unknown, unknown known, and unknown unknown. And here you can see where I've placed those items from the threat hunting process, such as external reports, static detections, IOC scanning, and proactive threat hunting. But I'm going to take time to explain them to you, show you my dark and twisted mind. But so when it comes to known knowns, this is when I'm talking about, it's the situation where we know what artifacts are and that they exist. For example, the intel reports and the threat reports that I read, we know the attack happened because they're reporting on it, and they're involved, or they're adding a lot of indicators of compromise to prove, here, this is how we found it. Also, triggered static detections. The reason I want to mention that they're triggered is because the static detections at rest fall into a different quadrant. But once that alert triggers, you know that the artifacts are going to be there, and you know that there's maliciousness on your network. The known unknown quadrant. This quadrant contains artifacts that we know, such as IOCs, but we're unsure if they exist. For example, if we said threat intel report that listed a lot of IOCs for it, we're going to take, extract them all from the intel report, create a search in our environment. The artifacts are known because we have our IOCs, but we're searching for it in our environment. Now, once again, not the best thing, but a critical process of the incident response process, because you got to find out, does this relate to us? Now, don't all, and I know I'm guilty of this in my early years, but just because IOCs don't come back and you haven't had any hits, don't say, hey, we're not compromised by this attack. Like and as I stated earlier, they can change them real quick. A symbol, comma, a different character, that'll change the whole hash, and you want to keep digging and always assume that you're compromised. The known unknowns. Now this one's a little tricky because it actually might overlap into the unknowns, but this is where I put static detections, snort, SIM rules that have not triggered. Now the reason for this is because we know that if we built a query that's looking for maliciousness, we know the behaviors that we're looking for. We know they're out there. We know threat actors perform them. But we don't know the artifacts exist in our environment. For example, what computer is creating that activity? Which computer is compromised? What are the command line arguments that they're executing? We don't know those things. So this was a little tricky, but once again, these type of detections are important for the process and to increase your security posture. And the unknown unknowns, this is the quadrant that I live in. Both the artifacts and behaviors or activity and the existence of either is unknown. This is where proactive threat hunting falls. Being hypothesis driven, we're really just guessing which TTP or behavior that we will find, and we have no clue what the artifacts are as well. We're really just kind of taking a dart and throwing it, seeing where it sticks and seeing what we find. But you know, we have a general idea of the output, what it will be, and because the tuning, if it comes back and it's not expected, you know, we have to rethink the process, create a hypothesis, and continue on. I'm really tearing through this. You're welcome. I know we all want to watch hackers. So your takeaways. So now I've thrown all this information from metrics to matrix. I hope you have a better idea of what a holistic approach to threat hunting and having good cybersecurity posture from a blue team side of things. All the factors that I've mentioned play a role in defining maliciousness. They just do it in different ways. You know, also as good as ML and AI algorithms are, we shouldn't just set it and forget it and rely solely on those. Once again, they're lacking the context. These are all more tools to increase our capabilities. They're not the final solution to fix everything. Anything can be an IOC. It doesn't have to come from a certified or well-known company. It could be artifacts that you found in your own environment. So never, you know, discredit yourself. So sophisticated actors will tailor their attacks per company, because just like the defense side of the house, no attacks are one size fits all, so no detections are one size fits all. Trust in your humans. Don't be that company or organization that continues to take on tool after tool after tool. All you're doing is increasing your technical debt, and you're probably burning out your analysts even faster because, hey, now you have another tool to look in. Hey, you have another log source to look for. Let the humans be the ones to drive the change. Let them be the ones to say, hey, this needs fixed. We need to ingest this. You know, because the creativity plays a big role into what we're doing. And for the climax, I know this has been burning and everyone's wondering what the answer is. But the solution you might not have expected, it's a balance between tools, machines, and humans. If you can leverage their strengths or their relative strengths, then you're really succeeding as an organization. If you talk in ultimatums and say this tool, this tool, this tool, or this person, this person, this person, what if that tool is no longer supported? What if that person finds a better job and leaves? I mean, you're kind of in trouble there. But if you lean on the creativity of the people, trust in them, train them when needed, and then bring in some tools and say, what can you do with this? Then you'll be successful. Thank you all for taking time to listen to this. I really enjoyed being a part of this conference, especially it being my first time, especially being a speaker. I do want to thank the the organizers of BSides Buffalo. Thank you for choosing me. Also to the people that made this happen, my wonderful marketing department at Cyborg Security, because what I wrote didn't look like this. It was a little rougher. Also, my wife, I'd probably get in trouble if I didn't mention her, but she sat there and listened to me nonstop, repeat this over and over. And also to a colleague and a friend of mine, happy birthday, Chad. All right, questions? Oh, and if you want to find out more about Cyborg Security, by all means, follow us on our platforms.
When you're doing your or scheduling your analytics, how often do you find yourself in a position where you have your analytics right, but then you don't realize that you're not collecting the logs required for the analytics to fire off, and how how do you go about identifying that in the process?
So the question was, and correct me if I'm wrong, what do I do when I'm in a situation where everything's right, but emulation, hypothesis, but the log sources aren't there?
Yeah.
So luckily I live in a lab environment, so I can talk to my security engineer and say, hey, we need these logs. And this comes up a lot, especially when it does come to registry keys. Registry keys, they're very powerful. They hold all the settings in your Windows box that you can configure, from dark theme to light theme to group policies. But there's not a lot of auditing on them because they can be so noisy. So whenever it comes time to that, I talk to my security engineer. If I were in a corporation or a larger organization, I would have to build a use case, like I stated earlier, and say, here's my threat. I don't have these logs, and here's how this could add value to our network. Now, after creating that, I hope that the CFO agrees, because it's probably going to bump up my license. But that's how I would approach that process.
What do you do in terms of aging your log retention and management of that storage? It's not a resource.
So the question was, what do I do with log retention? Me? I'm lucky I don't have to deal with that. I'm just my threat hunter. Once again, I live in a lab environment, so we can keep larger loads because our lab environment is full of maliciousness and us testing. I couldn't answer that question because I've never sat in a engineer's position, so I apologize.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? All right, thank you very much.